Welcome to Community Closeups, a webinar series highlighting the unique and talented individuals in our community. Happy New Year's, David. How are you?
Thanks. We are in a new decade. Exciting. The year has turned, and we've got lots ahead of us. It feels like a year-long conference season. I think we tend to say that at the end of the year, but I feel like things are kicking back up. We already have things on the calendar, so things are never dead in the community, right? Always fun.
Yeah, you feel like November is the end of conference season, and then you get December off, and then it just kicks back up again, and you start planning out 2020 and realizing that you don't have enough time to do all the things you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. We've got all the cons and the fests and SharePoint conference, and before you know it, Ignite. Summit is right around the corner, so it's a lot to be excited about. Lots of news. So
Yeah, I'm excited.
yep, I agree. Today, though, we're going to be talking with Emily Mancini, who is an architect at Simpraxis Consulting. Emily, thank you for joining us and being our guest today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. You are from Beverly, Massachusetts, up there in the Northeast. So why don't you start out by telling the community a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I was born in New England. So I was born in Warwick, New York, and I've lived a couple different places, Chicago and Seattle. I have a little bit of a curly background. So I've been a homeschool tutor, communications manager, have an art background and English literature, and finally stumbled upon my love of Office 365 while working at a fast-growing biotech. So it's been a wonderful past couple of years.
All right, very cool. And of course, as all wonderful stories end, SharePoint becomes part of that, right?
Absolutely.
Very cool. So you moved around the country. What took you around the country?
I moved around for college. I changed my major 7 times, which I never recommend to anyone who wants to graduate quickly and a little bit cheaper, but I learned a lot along the way. So went to Chicago for fibers and materials studies, and then ended up in Seattle graduating with a degree in English literature.
Wow. Okay. What was your favorite place to live between everything? I mean, you're back in New England now, so I'm assuming that's sort of home, but
Definitely Seattle. It's fantastic. I think the weather is nice. There's so much to the city, and you can find volcanoes, islands, hot springs, all within a couple hours drive. So having that much diversity and not so much urban sprawl was something that I really loved about being there.
Any plans
cool.
back, or are you stuck in New England for the time being?
Oh, very tough question. My husband is a scientist at a biotech, so Boston is definitely the center for it, but I do try to convince him on a daily basis, so we'll see.
Oh, he works in Boston.
Yes, he does.
And Beverly is north, like north of Salem, like kind of, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just 1 mile over the bridge in Salem, so I'm definitely still in the Halloween witch city and get all those spooky vibes nearly year round.
So how long were you in Seattle for?
8 years.
Oh wow, that's a long time. What was your bar none like favorite place to go? Or obviously the home of Starbucks, you had Microsoft there. What was like the one thing that in New England you can't have, or you're just like, oh my gosh, I wish I was still in Seattle for?
Ooh, tough question. I used to say the craft beer scene, but I will say New England has definitely been catching up, which is awesome. Probably the temperate weather and being able to hike and camp year round. So being able to go camping on a beach near sea stacks in February is something you definitely can't do in Boston without some serious camping gear that I do not want to commit to.
But Bo's a big camper in Denver, right?
I am, yeah. We go out basically from the beginning of May all the way through September. We try to go out almost every weekend to go camping out in the mountains. It's kind of a great way just to escape the heat because Denver is really, really hot. Like July, the average temperature is high 90s, like 96 or so. So you go up to like Aspen and it's another 20 degrees cooler than it was in Denver. So it's just a great way to escape the desert that is Colorado.
I had a wonderful time in Colorado. I went to Salida and
Mhm.
the hot springs near there and fell in love. It's so gorgeous. A lot of that, I'd say, add about 50% humidity, and that feels a lot like Seattle camping.
Yeah, it's very dry here. Salida is really cool. So my favorite town is just north of it, called Buena Vista. Kind of a Spanish town. Lots of Spanish architecture there, but it kind of just sets right on the Rockies and just views 360. It's a beautiful place.
That's phenomenal.
Have you, so if you, are you and your husband Emily both big campers? You like to both camp?
Me a little bit more so. We do a lot. I grew up going to Mount Desert Campground in Maine. It's Acadia National Park, and my family used to go and camp for 1 month every summer. So pretty wonderful being on the sound and being intense, and I have a lot of fond memories of that noise of rain pouring down on the tent at night and campfires
I was,
every night,
I was gonna
nonstop
say
reading.
you were a month long camping?
Yeah, my
Wow.
parents are kind of incredible to be willing to do that with 2 children.
Wow.
Yeah, that's impressive. We have camping down here. My wife likes to go kind of the same thing, a little bit more than me, but we'll go camping on the beach, which is kind of cool for Southern California. But that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm quite jealous of your location.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't be jealous if we showed you some of the bills. It's not.
That's
There's
fair.
a fine line trade-off. Or the well, I was gonna say or the traffic, but then again, you're near Boston, which is potentially one of the worst traffic cities in the world. So,
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's a lot of perks in working remote.
yep, I am
It,
there with you.
it's not even like population, it's just the fact that the roads don't make any sense in Boston. So traffic just naturally becomes a mess just because there's no, like, it's hard to get anywhere.
Yeah,
Inter-
absolutely. My
with like
highway
private
going,
roads.
yeah, my highway going in is 2 lanes. So how can you get hundreds of thousands of people in 2 lanes? And then they have all these merges, right, where it's a stop sign and no merge lane to go right on. So lots of accidents.
I think the best advice I had gotten when I was going in a lot for the SharePoint Saturdays up in New England with Mark and Julie is don't rent a car, just Uber or Lyft everywhere. And I was like, nah, I like having the freedom of a car. By far the best advice ever. Like just let someone else who lives there do the driving. So being a big movie fan, of course, one of the things that you listed was Jurassic Park, and I'm just going to quote your line here when we asked you about your favorite movie. You said Jurassic Park, science tech, cheesy lines from Jeff Goldblum, and dinosaurs eating people. What could be better than that? So I love it too because it kind of reminds me of a dawn of a new era of movies from a 3D animation perspective. But why is it, in addition to those little items that you listed, why is it one of your favorites?
I think probably what started the interest is when it first came out, I was definitely not allowed to see it. And then I was terrified of the raptors in the kitchen for forever. But when I got older, I really appreciated all of the cheesy one-liners that are so quotable. I like that all of the animation has really stood the test of time. Sometimes you can see some computer graphics now and it doesn't look the same. Watching Jurassic Park actually isn't that painful. And it's a lot easier to suspend your disbelief with something so extreme you know is not really going to happen. And growing up, I was a huge dinosaur fan. So I used to get these subscription boxes and I'd have a card that described a dinosaur and I'd build their little skeletons. So just this perfect match of adventure movie, childhood favorite thing, and Jeff Goldblum being weird.
So I'm interested actually about how you start your day. So you were talking about how you start your day with coffee with your husband, and then uh, you something about Swedish fika. I assume it's pronounced fika, in that you like to take a intentional pause to the start of your day. Can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. So the Swedish fika is something that we learned about recently, and it's this cultural phenomenon, supposedly. Someone who lives in Sweden can probably correct me on this and speak to a little better. But the idea is that every day taking a pause with your family and friends to have a little something to eat or drink and how important that is. And with how passionate we both are about our jobs, and I think as Americans, how busy you are and how much we work, very often we're rushing from one thing to another. So starting our day together, having that moment of connection, having that pause and thinking about what we're going to do that day, what's the most important, and spending some time together was something that we found really revolutionized how the rest of our day went. Instead of waking up, rushing from the alarm to the train and then to work, having that little bit of moment to calm and kind of let the day wake up with you.
And how much time do you spend doing that? Is that like a half hour thing? Just before you start work, or?
Usually half hour on a super busy day. Sometimes it's a little cramped to 15 minutes, but we do try to do a half hour every day.
Very cool.
Yeah, that is good.
I basically roll out of bed and go to my desk. So yeah, start practicing.
Well, I'm up at like the middle of the night, so it's I'm in the same boat. It's like if I'm getting up and getting the coffee, putting it beside my wife's bed, and then waiting for her to wake up.
Wake up at like 4 a.m. and no one else is going to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm convinced you never sleep.
Sometimes it feels like that, honestly. Yeah.
Well, you look good for not sleeping, David.
Yeah, my hair is always done, so that helps. It's never have to worry about that.
Oh, you've learned about this Swedish phenomenon. Have you ever visited?
I've been to Stockholm once, and I will be going again later this year. So I'm pretty excited now that I know about Swedish fika to try and observe and learn a little bit more about it officially. And Julie Turner raves about a coffee place that she goes to there all the time. So it's definitely on my list.
Awesome. Is that a vacation or?
Hopefully going to be going for a talk, which will be great.
Oh, awesome.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, we know a few of the guys that run like the SharePoint Saturday in Stockholm, and so I was thinking about trying to make it this year. DRC, who was on our show, went last year, and so I think it'd be neat to go visit there as well. So, have you traveled a lot? You and your husband have traveled a lot together?
Yeah, I would say it's a lot. Some of our favorites most recently have been places like Mexico City, and he actually has a sabbatical for his job where he gets 6 weeks off. And since I get to work remote, I'll be going with him to Argentina later this year. And I'm super excited because I would really like to work on my Spanish. So going a couple different places more often really helps with that opportunity. And I studied abroad in Spain when I was in college.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that one of your most favorite places was in Spain. Is it a cathedral there? Or?
Yeah, there's this cathedral in the town where we were. It was a really small town, about 30,000 people, but it had the best example of a French Gothic cathedral. And I was in an art program while I was there. They were redoing the stained glass of the rose window in that cathedral, and they had all this scaffolding set up. So we got this special behind the scenes tour where we got to climb all this scaffolding and be up close on that rose window, which was pretty phenomenal and definitely inspired my stained glass habit that I have now.
Are you making stained glass now, or you just seek out places that have stained glass?
Ooh, I am making it, but I should probably be seeking it out more.
Get some more inspiration. That
Yeah, exactly.
That also sounds like an OSHA hazard, just climbing up scaffolding in Spain, but maybe they don't have the same rules and regulations that we do.
I was pretty terrified at the time because it was like 30 or 40-mile-per-hour winds that day. So the whole thing was shaking, and we were all looking at each other thinking, is this really allowed? Is this really how this is going to go? And we all made it.
Were you strapped into anything, or you were just like climbing the scaffolding and that was it?
Just climbing scaffolding, that was it. And no warning either. So, a lot of us were in like ballet flats and dresses, hoping that we're going to not fall or.
Wow. Now you said that speaking of stained glass, you said that you make stained glass and you find that as relaxing, right? To me, that sounds like the most stressful thing in the world, right? Like I'm gonna break something, or because there's no like Control Z there, right? There's no undo. But you said it's relaxing. So how did I mean, honestly, I have no idea. I don't think I've ever known anyone who does stained glass. How in the world did that happen?
So originally when I went to art school, I was for fibers and materials studies, it's quilting, so piecing together fabrics. So definitely had that mentality of cutting out shapes and piecing them together to make images with different colors. And I don't remember how it started, but I got the stained glass classes as a gift, and we have space in our basement, and it doesn't take up much room because you just have a little soldering iron, a grinder, and your glass cutters are really hand tools. So it's nice to step away from computers and words and screens and to go down there, listen to some podcasts, cut glass, make some tropical plants are a lot of what I make and hang them in my windows to try and convince myself I don't live in frigid Boston.
Well, so my birthday's coming up in April. Like stained glass. So if you find yourself making like a SharePoint logo and stained glass, I would happily hang it right behind me. So
Noted.
I was thinking of visions of Parker, like in some stained glass, celestial kind of thing.
I think I'll have to practice a bit more to get up to the Parker level. I'm definitely not there just yet. Those quills would be quite the challenge.
Yeah. How often do you do it? Like what and how long does it take to, obviously the complexity of it, varies probably in terms of how long it takes to complete a project, but what does it usually involve in terms of time commitment to go from beginning to end on a project for that?
I'm still pretty small, so my things kind of end up, within a foot and a half. When you go larger, you have to have more structural enforcements and use the more metal and cut it. And I find that part a lot of hard work and less enjoyable. So I'd say my smaller projects are kind of 3 to 6 hours. And you don't have to do it all at once. So usually I'll do a day where I cut a bunch and then you do the copper taping, and maybe I'll do that while watching a movie. So you kind of batch projects.
That's cool.
Yeah. Anytime I can make myself less guilty for watching a movie and have a little art project on the side is always fun.
Multitasking, right?
Exactly. And I think Netflix came out with all of they weren't streaming yet. They were more, 5 discs at a time or whatever crazy amount it used to be while I was in art school. And since I was quilting and embroidering, it's really boring to sit around for 8 hours and just silence and sew. So definitely got addicted to Netflix binging young. And now having art, I'm like, oh, okay, great. Now I can go watch Great British Baking Show or whatever it is for a couple of hours.
So speaking of Netflix and baking, I can't decide which I want to talk about first, so we'll go with baking. Do you like to cook or bake?
I don't. So I'm one of the challenging people where I'm, gluten and dairy free and have all these restrictions. So I've tried to bake. And if anyone out there in the Microsoft community has good recipes, please let me know, because I tried to make a couple things and they turned out gray. So I'm definitely not successful there just yet. But I have a smoker and like to do a lot of smoked meats and make our own stocks and those kinds of things. A lot of soup because, again, Boston cold, winter season.
yes, I'm also a big time smoker too. I love to smoke meat during the summertime, so I always have some type of meat, chicken or pork, smoking for dinner. It's a very
Nice.
unhealthy habit of mine, but
I like not to think about that part. Serve it
Do you
with
have
kale, it's fine.
There you go. Do you have a favorite kind of meat that you guys, it's like your go-to to smoke?
Probably smoked chicken, just because we like making the chicken stock, and it's a short one. I mean, it only takes 4 hours when you do some of those more, red meats or pork shoulders, things like that. When it's 18 hours, you kind of plan your weekend around it, so it's a little tougher.
A little stained glass, a little smoked meat.
Yeah. It's pretty
Perfect.
much my life here. Add a couple of Mai Tais to go with the smoked meat, and you got a great weekend.
So you had said that the Mushroom Kingdom is the game or movie universe you'd like to most live in. Racing carts, collecting coins. Do you see yourself? Do you connect specifically with a particular character from the game?
So I'd say the older games, I was definitely into Toad, but with the newer ones, I'm a pretty big fan of Daisy. Growing up, one of my favorite movies was Beauty and the Beast because I was a huge reader, and Belle is as well, and Daisy kind of looks like Belle, so it all fits together.
so you mentioned that you like tiki drinks. So do you like to travel to places where you can consume them? And also, what is your favorite beachside drink?
Ooh, so probably pina colada for beachside drink. For a really long time, I thought that I hated coconut, pineapple, and rum. Turns out I just didn't have them together, and it's fantastic. So I've seen the light. Um, I have a couple of different places on Google Maps. Whenever I tend to read about something in an article or see it, I'll just star it. So then when I'm traveling for work or for personal, I'll see what's on the map that we can go see. And I do like going to all the, you know, Polynesian tiki divey bars. So the one in Vegas, I believe it's called Frankie's. So last time I was there for SPC, I went to that one, and there's something about these old bars with your kind of sticky tiki drink and a jukebox, hanging out listening to the music, a fake thatched roof in the middle of some highway. I really enjoy this idea of having this vacation anywhere, suspending your disbelief for a minute.
Yeah, I think it is called Frankie's. You said your favorite or your dream car would be a 1960s VW bus, which are, hard to find in good condition these days. So what's your inspiration for having that?
So I think it's part, I would love to have a camper van, because one part now that I'm getting older that I don't love about camping is the sore back. So having a bed and a little kitchen, and also not having to deal with setup and breakdown and hopping from place to place would be really cool. The other part is growing up, my dad had a motorcycle, and it was a BMW frame, but it was a Volkswagen Beetle engine in it. So we would take this motorcycle to Volkswagen shows all the time. So growing up, it would be me and him, we'd camp, and then we'd go look at all these Volkswagen Beetles and buses the next day and enter his motorcycle in contests, and such a fond memory of doing that.
Did he custom make it?
He didn't make it, someone else made it, and I think there was only, 3 made in the US for this guy. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, have you seen they do so they did they're called Volkspods. They basically made scooters out of, this is like unrelated but kind of, they would take like the fenders of, you should look this up, take fenders of like a Volkswagen Bug and put them around scooters, and so it looks like you're riding, like, this is something that like the minions from Pixar would be driving. They're really funny looking bikes.
I'm definitely going to look that up. I have my motorcycle license, so who knows, maybe that's my next vehicle.
They are adorable. So
all right, so one of the things that we've been doing on some newer segments with the show is called rapid fire or fill in the blank. It's been kind of fun. We started at Ignite with Vesa. So we'll do the rapid fire, and we're going to give you 2 options. You just choose which is your favorite, and it's kind of a nice quick little way for some in the community to understand what you like and don't like. All right?
Ready.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Wine or beer?
Wine.
Treadmill or couch?
Couch.
Texting or talking?
Talking.
Cake or pie?
Cake.
Summer or winter?
Summer. Ask
permission or beg for forgiveness?
Ask permission.
Okay, that's interesting. All right,
I know.
And then it's a whole other segment on some of
those. Too nice of a person.
Yeah. Okay, so fill in the blank. If only one artist on your playlist.
Harry Nilsson.
The best ice cream flavor is?
Cookies and cream.
The first topping on a pizza should be?
Cheese.
If you could have one superpower, it would be?
Invisibility.
Interesting. All right, cool. Fun.
Wouldn't that be nice as a consultant? You can hang out in the room after a meeting. You can find out, how it's going. You want to hear the real answers of what they're struggling with?
True. You're much more nicer with that power than I think I would have been.
Well, and then maybe cutting the line in Disney World, so I don't have to wait for 2 hours.
There you go.
So you grew up in New England, live in Boston now, lived in Seattle, and then went back to Boston. I would say some significant coffee locations, right? So I know you had mentioned that you do like the morning, and Bo had brought up coffee with your husband. So is there a favorite? I assume coffee plays a big part for you, or you're a big fan. Is there a favorite coffee location or flavor or something about that?
That's a good question. I will say I've recently fallen in love with macadamia nut milk, and I actually
Hmm.
discovered it while I was in LA. Go figure. Of course, LA has some obscure nut milk to introduce me to. So that's definitely upped my coffee game. I don't get too
Interesting.
fancy when I'm at home, but it's definitely one of my favorite things when I'm in Seattle to go try new local shops, partly for whatever they're doing with the coffee, but also partly just seeing the new communities and art in coffee shops, having a new place to work and kind of step out of your routine is always really nice.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up. I love macadamia nuts, so I'm very curious what that milk tastes like.
Delicious.
Yeah. Heaven, liquid heaven.
The only thing better is chocolate covered macadamia nuts,
You can just mix the chocolate in, right?
for sure.
Chocolate on anything usually goes over well, so
Yeah, chocolate on smoked bacon, another classic.
yes.
You had me at bacon.
Chocolate, candy bacon, just add more
Mm.
sugar, and I think we're all set.
Speaking of food, spicy tuna, sushi, a lot of seafood I'm noticing was part of your favorite foods. Um, was that coming from the New England roots?
My guess is Seattle from
Uh,
Asia out there. That's my guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Bo's got it. So, moved to Seattle, definitely started falling in love with seafood, stronger opinions about salmon. So, my friends always tease me because in Boston, it'll just say salmon. I'm like, you're not going to buy it unless it has a name. Like, is that Chinook? Is that King? Like, there's different types. Um, so, really love that fresh fish chopped up. I recently went to Hawaii for the first time. Loved that you could just have poke bowls every single day. So delicious.
what part of Hawaii did you go to?
Maui. So I have a
Okay.
family friend that lives in Paia and they were traveling. So we went and stayed at their house. And I definitely am into a little bit of the hippy dippy yoga, healthy food vibe. And warm water, 80 degrees plus, is my absolute favorite thing in the world.
We try and do like a tropical trip like every other year. So go down to the Caribbean or something and spend a week just doing nothing but drinking tiki drinks and getting burned.
Yeah, same here. Add a couple books in there, and it's my favorite. We'll have to exchange favorite places. Make sure I'm going all the good ones.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, just because you brought this up, we went to Exuma last year um, in the Bahamas, and it was honestly the best trip I've ever had. The city, it was during like peak season, and there was no one there. We would go to a beach, it's like a world-class beach, and there'd be us and like two other people like half a mile down. It was just empty, so you could spend all day just by yourself. And it was the most relaxing vacation I've ever had. So Exuma should be on your list of places to go. Yeah,
Sounds awesome.
it was a great trip. So that is my number one recommendation so far.
Sold. My number one recommendation for you, if you haven't been yet, would be Belize. We really liked it.
What's their favorite drink down there? What are they known for? Do they have any drinks?
Whew. So I don't know if this is like a G-rated podcast, but the national drink of Belize is actually called a panty ripper.
Hmm.
Um, it's it's coconut rum and pineapple juice.
Which you said are great
You walked me into that
combinations.
one, Bo.
Yeah, I did. I walked right into it. Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to try. I don't like coconut and I don't like pineapple, but maybe I just followed the suit that you did, and I just haven't had it in the right. Uh,
Ratio or something.
and yeah,
You like to read quite a bit. Is there a favorite author or like an all-time favorite book where you could just
Whew.
reread it, even though you've already read it? It's like, oh, I could totally just pick this up and reread it and be in my happy place.
it's Jane Austen, Dave.
I mean, that's up there. Yes, that's in my, I'd say first or second. It's kind of like choosing children. So I'd say probably can't pick smaller than top three. Jane Austen, I really like Haruki Murakami, if you've ever read him. He's a Japanese author and he has a lot of magical realism. And one of my favorite books of his is The Wind Up Bird Chronicle. It's one of those books where while you're reading it, you don't know what's reality in the narrative, and then it starts to make you question your reality a little bit and how you perceive things. So he's so inventive. I really enjoy going on his journeys.
You have a wide spectrum of experience in an array of technologies and stuff. How did you get into SharePoint?
Great question. So I've been part of a bunch of different implementations at the different companies that I'd worked for, not specific to SharePoint, but just different IT technologies. And so when I joined Bluebird Bio, they were first implementing Office 365 and building their first SharePoint site and all these different items. So I was actually in the HR department at the time. And HR often goes first with these types of projects. And so I was on the team and helping everyone design. And I had this moment with my managers in the room and some consultants where I was presenting and I forgot I was presenting, and we were talking through a technical problem, and they watched me Google it and then start playing in the system. So they realized I was in the wrong job and gave me opportunities to start presenting and training the company on all these different solutions focused on how to help in productivity. And for me, it was really this moment of having an English literature background and an art background, and being a training and development facilitator and being a homeschool teacher. Everything started to all click together. And I realized that with SharePoint, I could do all of the things that I loved, and they didn't have to be these separate pillars anymore. So discovering user experience and moving into a lot of this information management really excited me.
So you fell into it by accident
I
because we're
did.
sharing? Yeah, I think a lot of us fall into it by accident, or then we get trapped. And it's so welcome to the community.
Trapped, addicted.
We're all stuck here and to the club. I graduated college, and my first job was, hey, we're working on this thing called BPause. It's the new thing from Microsoft. And I was like, all right, that sounds cool. And then I just got stuck, and I've done nothing, and I've known nothing else besides SharePoint. So I fell into it by accident as well.
I did have the opportunity to potentially leave, and I was working on other implementations at the same time too. And they were Oracle implementations. And as you can imagine, I was not really enticed to spend more time on those platforms. So
Couldn't
definitely
imagine
looking
why.
at it. Yeah.
And now you work at some Praxis, right? So how did that move go from your previous organization to some Praxis? Because I think you were working with them, right?
It was, yeah. So I was really lucky. When I first fell in love with SharePoint, the person who was helping us was Jill Kaczynski, and she was our external consultant. And then she actually ended up joining Bluebird Bio, and I worked with her on the platform for a while. It was the two of us for a really long time. And she's really involved in the community, and she knew about Mark Anderson and Sue Hanley. So she actually reached out to them to have them partner with us and coach us and help us with more extensive customizations in our environment. So I'd been working with Mark and Sue for a couple of years, having them as partners. And then I was at a speaking gig.
And they both just know a little bit about SharePoint, right?
Yeah, just a little. So yeah. It's what a crazy experience, right? To your first ever experience with SharePoint, to work with these phenomenal experts who are so passionate about it and so willing and happy to teach. I just feel phenomenally lucky for how my path has worked out. I definitely pinch myself on a daily basis for where I am.
Yeah, and just a shout out to them, because I think it's deserving. Everyone, I think, is very lucky to have people like them in our community, because they provide so much knowledge for everyone else that, my job would be so much more difficult if it wasn't for people like Sue or Mark who contribute. So yeah, shout out to them.
Mm-hmm.
They're phenomenal.
And you also are doing more in the community now. You're doing some speaking. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what is so enticing and inviting to you about the M365 community, SharePoint, and all the like?
Well, I think it definitely started with me being in the situation where I had this huge thirst to learn more and expand my knowledge as I became a solo platform owner at my company, and I wanted to make the right decisions for road mapping and strategy and learn how to do everything I possibly could in it as well. And every time I had a question, the community was there for me. So now that I've had some experiences and have some things that I would love to share, it very much feels like a pay it forward situation for me where I should be so lucky to be able to help someone the way that I was to get where I am now. So it also feels like this huge group of friends. There's something phenomenal about showing up at these conferences and seeing all these people that you know that live all over the world, and you know so much about not just their work world and what they specialize in, but their personal lives, and everyone's so passionate about it. It's such a nice way to spend your time, and your work life is a lot of your days. So
Mhm.
being surrounded by all these other passionate, smart people is pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I like the most is that it doesn't matter. In many cases, the organizations we work for are competing in the marketplace, if you will, for work. But when it comes to our community, that's off the table. It doesn't matter. You're there helping a community friend, and none of the politics about business are in the way.
Ditto. No, so I've said this before too. Your reasoning is very similar to mine as well. Like when I started SharePoint 10 years ago, there was people in the community who were sharing everything, Bob Sherman and Andrew Connell and people like that who made my job so much easier. And so now it's like I would want to pay it back to everyone else who is me 10 years ago who got thrown into SharePoint and trying to figure out how it all works. So we have the same drive for why we want to be involved, and I think it's very important that that we realize how special this community is, because there aren't many communities like it.
Ditto.
This year, you're speaking at SharePoint conference. No, San Francisco. You're speaking at
Yes,
SB
TechCon.
Do you have any what are you talking about there? And then what other talks do you have this year, or do you have plans for any other talks?
So what I'm talking about at SP TechCon, I have two presentations. One is scaling SharePoint, meeting the demands of exponential growth, and I co-present with my colleague at Simpraxis, Derek Cash-Peterson, and I'm really excited about that. I'm also talking about migrating classic to modern pages and considerations to have when you're moving your content over. So using migrations as an opportunity to look at your content as more than a lift and shift, and to evaluate your content, build good user experiences in pages, and again, putting that IA into modern.
So for anyone going to SD TechCon, or you see you at the next event you speak at, what are some good icebreakers for someone to come up to you and talk to you? Because one of the things that we like to focus on in this show is kind of breaking down the barriers of people in the community and making it easier to making people feel more accessible. So name your top, you don't have to do three, but top three icebreakers if someone were to approach you at an event.
Well, I'd say if you're going on the social, like non-technical side, always love talking about stand-up comedy, tiki drinks and dinosaurs. So books, feel free. If you have any kind of technical questions, I also feel like dive right in. If I don't know the answers, I definitely will help find the right person in the community for you. I do love talking about information architecture and user experience and governance. So always dive in with those too.
So thank you, Emily, for joining us on the show today. It's great to have new ones in the community as part of the show. We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us and letting the rest of the community know a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me. It's been an honor to be on it.